This week on the show, we're going to dive into eBay's newly announced UK buyer fees. We've got announcements from Amazon and UPS, and I've got some really interesting sales. What is up, Galaxians? Welcome to episode number 280 of the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and I will be your host as we go through a little bit of reselling news, but some really interesting stuff. Primarily for those of you over in the UK, eBay recently announced what their buyer fees are going to look like and when they're going to go into effect. So we're going to cover that in some depth. We do also have an update from Amazon and some interesting things going on over at UPS. And then at the end of the show, as always, I've got a pretty interesting What Sold recap. There will, of course, be timestamps in the show notes and the video description down below if you want to go to a particular section. Also, just a quick housekeeping note. I normally don't ask at the beginning of the show for you to subscribe, but if you're not currently a subscriber to the show and you get something out of this, please consider doing that. I am, as of the time of recording, just 15 away from 2,000 subscribers, and that's a number I'd really like to get to. So normally I don't do that, but since I'm so close to 2K, I thought I would. With that little bit of housekeeping out of the way, let's do this reselling news.
News updates.
So eBay announced back in the fall that they were eliminating selling fees for private sellers, but there was hidden in their SEC announcement, and we covered it at the time. And a little bit of a note, a footnote, if you will, that they were going to be introducing buyer fees sometime in 2025. That announcement has now become official. This article over on Value Added Resource, and of course there will be links to these in the show notes and the video description down below as well. eBay UK buyer fees coming February 4th, 2025. What you need to know. They have finally released details of their plans to introduce buyer fees for private sales in the UK. So this is just for private sellers. eBay in the UK is really making a push to separate private from business sellers. This is part of that plan. Again, kind of hidden an announcement in the fall and now widely introduced. The move to introduce buyer fees was first reported, as I mentioned, back in October and comes as part of a larger consumer-to-consumer shift for eBay in the UK, which, as we just talked about, removed selling fees for private sales in most categories. Here's how eBay plans to remonetize those sales. And again, this goes into effect February 4th, so in about a month. Buyer protection fees. This is a term we've seen on multiple sites who have tried to move fees from sellers to buyers. We have talked over the last several months about the different platforms that have done that and what their experiences have been. Poshmark made it less than 3 weeks. Mercari made it about 9 months. Theirs, by the time you hear this, will have switched to kind of a split model where the seller is going to pay 10% and the buyer is going to pay, again, a buyer protection fee. So this has been kind of an ongoing experiment. I'm frankly a little surprised given how that went for those other platforms that eBay has decided to move forward with this, but here we go. eBay is touting the benefits of paying a protection fee, saying it gives buyers more peace of mind when shopping. 24/7 customer support. Buyers can connect with a real person by phone at any time of day or start a chat to get quick answers. Seller only paid after delivery. This has been a real sticking point for private sellers. When buying from private sellers, funds will only be sent to the seller once the item has been delivered. So this is a change. We talked about this was going to be in force a couple of weeks ago. So if you are registered as a private seller in the UK and you sell something, your funds are going to be held by eBay until that item is delivered. If you're a business seller, that's not the case. Your funds will be available as normal. You can have automatic transfer of those funds set up. If you're a private seller, that's gone away also. So really trying to force people who are, how shall we say, incorrectly registered as private sellers, but are actually business sellers, to get them to move into the correct category. Holding their funds obviously is going to be one of those. We've also still got buyers covered with other great free services like eBay's money back guarantee and authenticity guarantee. Secure transactions. All payments are encrypted end-to-end and handled by our trusted payment partners. None of that really is new other than the holding of the funds. This is all stuff that was available essentially for free previously and is available for free on a lot of other sites. Um, this is, again, Mercari almost verbatim what their quote unquote buyer protection fee is going to cover. So this is going to be interesting to see. If you're a seller in the UK or a buyer in the UK that happens to be watching this, let me know what you think of any of this down in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube or happen to be listening over on Spotify. The last part, as Liz points out, isn't particularly new, as payments had been encrypted and handled by those payment partners since eBay began managing payments in 2018. So more than a couple of minutes ago. How the buyer protection fee works: the fee will be included in the item price from private sellers, so there are no surprises at checkout. So unlike what Mercari did back at the beginning, where you didn't see those fees until the end, it's actually going to be baked into the price, which is something Mercari had tried a little later in their experiment. So if you list a $10 item, the fees will be added to that, and that's what you'll see as a buyer for the item. Buyers will pay up to 4% of the item price plus a flat 75 pence, I believe it is. For example, when they see an item for $20, the fee of I guess it's 20 pounds, a fee of £1.49 will already be part of the price. So again, that 20-pound item will show on eBay UK at $21.49. We're going to get into that a little bit further on in this segment. The fee is lower on higher priced items over 300 pounds, and there is a cap on the total amount that you'll ever have to pay. For items from business sellers, you get all those buyer protection benefits at no extra cost. So again, if you're buying from someone who is registered as a business seller, these fees do not apply. The seller will actually be paying their normal final value fees that they've always paid. While the initial announcement doesn't get specific about the fee breakdown for higher priced item, the full policy page does, including a chart that shows how the fee is calculated. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see that here in just a second. This is where it gets a little interesting. The buyer protection fee will be calculated as a flat fee of 75 pence per item. It's not per transaction. It's per item. So if you order 10 items, that 75 pence fee is going to apply 10 times. So be aware of that. 4% of the item price up to 300, and then 2% of any portion of the price from 300 to 4,000 pounds. There's also a cap on the total amount of fee you'll ever pay. Any portion of the price over that 4K will not incur any additional fee. And again, here is a handy little chart if you're watching on YouTube. And again, this will be linked in the show notes down below if you want to go take a look at this. It should also be available on eBay UK. Note, while these fees look like quite a cost savings compared to the average 13% standard final value fee that varied depending on category, it's important to remember, she points out, that previously private sellers were often not paying the full final value fee amount due to eBay's very generous and frequent promotions. They discounted final value fees very regularly over there. Before going fee free, easy for me to say, for private sellers back in October, eBay used to send these discount promotions to private sellers about every 2 weeks or so, offering sometimes up to 70 or 80% off of the standard fee. To keep the math simple, if you had a sale at $100 total in a category with 10% final value fee, you would have paid $10 in fees. But if it was 80% off of that, you were only paying $2 plus, again, that 30 pence per order. This now will be 75 pence per item on an order, and then 4%, up to 4%. They say, I would imagine most things will probably be at the top of that 4%. So eBay potentially will be making more money. eBay stopped giving out these promo codes a couple of weeks before announcing the change to fee-free selling. This means, in theory, eBay would likely end up making more money on these items than they would have previously, with the private seller setting a price to account for the discounted final value fee. That is true to the extent that sellers, private sellers, don't make adjustments to their price. There's an interesting little blurb over on e-commerce bites. A former business development director for eBay UK named Robert Bassett, who now works for Temu, posted about the changes on a post over on LinkedIn. He worked with many large used media sellers during his time and said the changes will potentially hurt casual private sales of media on eBay. He said private sellers who used to sell a DVD for £5 that cost £2 to pack and post would net £2.20 after fees prior to eBay making this change 3 months ago. After the introduction of buyer fees next month, private sellers selling the same used DVD would now have to price the item lower at £4.08 in order to have eBay display the price as $5, because remember that buyer fee is going to be added on to the item. So if they want the item to show and to sell for $5, if they want to still eat that fee, which a lot of sellers over on Mercari were doing, they've got to reduce the price down to $4.08 to show it at $5. Okay. After shipping costs and no fees, of course, for a private seller, the seller now is only going to net $2 or £2.08, according to Bassett's calculations. As a seller, you're actually going to get less money than when you were paying the fees previously. So for small private sellers on low cost items, this may not be a good deal for you, even though it sounds like it probably should be. So keep that in mind. I don't know. Again, I guess it depends on how many of these private sellers are actually private sellers. If you are a private seller in the UK, what are you going to do? How are you going to price items? Are you going to take that fee into account and reduce the price of your item, or are you going to let it be priced higher? My personal feeling has always been, if the market value of your item is whatever it is, $10, if everybody's selling it for $10, and all of a sudden, with nothing extra on yours, nothing unusual to make yours stand out, now you're going to be trying to ask 11. You're not, theoretically, you're no longer competitive. So you almost have to take that reduction. It's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out. How is the buyer protection fee added to my item price? When setting the item price, UK-based private sellers will see the buyer protection fee amount added to the total item price that buyers will see on the listing. You'll be able to see the fee amount before you complete it. So you'll know if you price this thing at £5 that it's going to have that fee added on, and it will show you what your total price shown to potential buyers is going to be. So you can then make that decision. I want to reduce the price. I'm fine with this. I want the buyer to pay that fee. I'm not willing to discount. Where do I see the buyer protection fee in my listings? When listing your item, you will see this buyer protection fee amount added to the listing price. You can also view the fee amount from your active listings. How is the fee calculated for auctions when the final selling price isn't known yet? When you enter a starting bid, we add the buyer protection fee so you can see what the buyer's minimum bid amount will be. So again, if your starting bid is £10, the fee will be calculated and shown to you and to the buyer as whatever the £10 plus the fee is. And as that number increases, as people bid, the number shown on the listing will increase in lockstep with that, if that makes sense. By including the fee in the buyer's bid price, we're making it simple and transparent so buyers always know what they'll pay and sellers know how much they'll receive. What happens to the buyer protection fee if the buyer makes a counteroffer? When a buyer sends a counteroffer, we'll show you the buyer's price breakdown, including the amount you will receive and the buyer protection fee paid to eBay. So again, you'll have all the information you need to accept or decline the offer. So you send out an offer or a potential buyer sends you an offer, there is, according to eBay, going to be a breakdown of what you'll receive and what eBay will receive. So you know raw data right up front how much money you're going to make. The buyer protection fee will be automatically added to all existing Buy It Now private listings, excluding cars, motorcycles, and vehicles, classified ads, and property. Those are categories that are not included in the fee-free private seller program. So that's why they're not included in this. That's going to take place on February 4th, again, including relisted listings and to any auctions which are created on or after February 4th. While private sellers pay no final value fees on these sales, they do still have the option to use listing features and advertising products, which do incur seller fees. So if you want to do promoted listings or you want to do any of the special add-ons that they offer, you will still be responsible for paying for those. eBay has not given details on how exactly the buyer fees will impact the calculation of those other selling fees. Since promoted listings advertising fees are charged on the total, including shipping and tax, it's likely that the total amount will include the buyer fee when calculating those ad fee costs, a fact that sellers will want to keep in mind when selecting their ad rate percentages. That is Liz's assumption that that's what's going to happen. I would tend to agree with that. They have always included everything in that fee, so I would expect that they'll include this buyer fee, again the 4% plus the 79 included, and whatever rate you've selected for your promoted fee will be calculated on that new total. So really interesting stuff going on over there. The big sticking point, of course, to all of this for private sellers is having funds held until after delivery has been a problem for many sellers, with some saying they will cease trading on that platform once the change goes into effect. So let me know, again, if you're in the UK, are you going to stop selling on eBay because they're going to hold your funds? They're not the only company that's doing that. Of course, Mercari has always done that. You don't get paid on Mercari here in the US. I assume it's the same in Japan until the item is marked as delivered and then a 3-day window has elapsed, or the buyer has reviewed you, rated you on the site. So this is kind of a similar thing. If you are a business seller trading as a private seller, having your funds held for whatever it might take in order to get the thing delivered could be a problem. So let me know in the comments what you think of this, whether or not you're in the UK. I'm always curious to know what people think about these big changes on these platforms. So that's what's going on with the buyer fees on eBay in the UK. Let's move on here. I didn't get right to the top here. This is an announcement. This is also over on e-commerce bites. Amazon sellers must update titles in the next 3 weeks. Amazon sellers will have fewer than 3 weeks to comply with the marketplace's latest crackdown. On January 3rd, Amazon announced new product title requirements that are set to take effect January 21st, 2025. It said in the announcement that it was updating the product title policy to, quote, standardize listings and enhance the shopping experience. They said, over time, we've observed that product titles have become longer, and they sometimes include redundant wording or characters that can decrease customer confidence, Amazon said. These new policy changes will help ensure that product titles are clear, concise, and consistent. That potentially makes it difficult for you to differentiate your listing from others. This probably really is going to affect branded sellers more. They appear to be the most concerned about this new provision that titles are not allowed to contain the same word more than twice. So 2 instances would be okay, but 3 or more is a no-go, with the exception of things like prepositions, articles, conjunctions, a and the, that sort of thing. Brand owners will have 14 days to act upon the suggestions before we update the titles to comply with our requirements, Amazon said. These suggestions, they noted, would be rolled out gradually, but they're not very specific about what that means. They note 22% of products on Amazon currently are not compliant with this new product titling requirement. So that is really interesting. That's an estimate from John Shea, who's the CEO of Momentum Commerce. He wrote a post on LinkedIn saying that the biggest reason for non-compliance was good old keyword stuffing, where people just put in sometimes irrelevant words to draw attention to their listing that were SEO friendly. Shea said what made the announcement most noteworthy was the fact that if brand owners did not manually correct non-compliant titles before January 21st, Amazon would automatically update them using AI-generated titles. For anyone who doubts, he said, Amazon's seriousness in AI, they're confident enough in their models to deploy them on roughly $150 billion worth of commerce. So be aware of that. If you are a seller over there, you're going to want to check your titles to make sure that they are in line with Amazon's new titling requirements. And if they are not, you are going to find that Amazon is going to create a new product listing title for you with AI, which if your experience with AI generated titles and descriptions is anything like mine, that could be a problem. The last thing we've got today, UPS made an announcement that Surepost is no longer available to P.O. boxes, Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and more. So this is a really interesting one, and I think it ties in with a couple of the things that we've talked about with the post office over the last month or so on this show. Shippers are scrambling for answers after UPS appears to have suddenly dropped P.O. boxes, Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, APO, FPO, and more from their Surepost service with no notice or explanation. They've not made any official public announcement about the change, but major shippers and logistic analysts are noting the service is no longer available to those destinations as of this was January 2nd, and that API calls attempting to create labels for Surepost to those locations now return a message saying UPS cannot deliver to those addresses. Tony Runyon from Red Stag Fulfillment, posted UPS Surepost update. From what we can see, you can no longer generate a label for packages going to PO, APO, or FPO boxes. The API returns a message that they cannot deliver to those addresses. Total guess: this is the first signal that UPS is planning to cut out USPS altogether for Surepost. No one has told me that, and I haven't read it anywhere, but it tracks with a lot of other things that are happening. In other words, this is going to become their version of FedEx's ground economy. Aaron Rubin, founder and CEO of Ship Hero, has also confirmed Surepost can no longer deliver to those locations because USPS had previously handled that last mile of their delivery, and that agreement ended on the 2nd. You can't use Surepost for P.O. boxes, APO, FPO, Alaska, Hawaii, or Puerto Rico effective today. I know some warning to update rules would have been nice. Previously, USPS delivered those packages. UPS agreement with USPS ended today. Again, that was on January 2nd. While the timing is certainly surprising, the article continues, the fact that UPS is moving in this direction isn't, as relations between the Postal Service and other carriers, which use the post office for that last mile delivery on hybrid shipping products, have been on the rocks for months. USPS recently cut rate discounts for consolidators, which we've talked about. They discontinued the use of dual labels for hybrid shipping services like this, which we have talked about, and is cracking down on shippers who incorrectly drop UPS Surepost or FedEx SmartPost ground economy packages off at the post office, which we have also talked about. So really, I guess the timing of this and the fact that there was no pre-warning that this was going to happen is not great. But this probably should not have been a surprise to anybody who's kind of been reading the tea leaves. USPS wants to capture all of that business themselves. That's why they've made the big push and some additional discounts on their Ground Advantage services, rather than getting whatever little slice of the pie they were getting from UPS or FedEx on these deals. They just want all that money themselves. I can't really say I blame them, but the way this thing has rolled out over the last several months has left sellers obviously in a really bad spot. In the latest shot across the bow, USPS announced new streamlined process to shippers to obtain negotiated service agreements tailored specifically to lightweight shipments. We talked about that last week. Mail Innovations talked about the elimination of Parcel Select lightweight product and the end of discounts for DDU entry, which forced them to put in a 25% increase to their rates. We covered that last week. So again, really, really messy stuff for the post office and the other affiliated shippers. Those partnerships, I guess they were potentially useful and helpful, but they were really probably not long for the world with everything that's going on at the post office trying to get themselves to be profitable. So that, my friends, is going to put a wrap on this week's Reselling News. As always, let me know what you think of any of that in the comments down below. Let's do some What Sold. It was a pretty decent week and a pretty decent month and a pretty decent year, to be fair. I think I posted over on Instagram at Galaxy CDs Rocks, if you're not following me over there. December was actually a record month for me. Not just a record December, it was literally my best month ever in 5+ years as a full-time reseller. So really, really excited about that. January is off to a good start. I think margins are going to be a little suspect for me in January. I am running, those of you who've been following for some time know, I do a monthly kind of like a clearance sale. And I've got about 1,800 items right now running at 70% off. This is my oldest of the old inventory. stuff that I'm just trying to get rid of. And I have been, since I started that sale on the 2nd, so 3 days ago from the time of recording, I have sold a ton of that stuff at 70% off. I'm eking out a little bit of profit margin on those items, but I'm moving old inventory and I'm generating cash flow. So my January sales numbers may not be quite what they have been in the past, and my margins certainly won't be. But from a cash flow standpoint, I think it's going to be a really good month. I've got a ton of stuff on sale. So if you're interested, just search for my store, Galaxy CDs Rocks, and go to the sale tab, and you should find thousands of items up to 70% off. So it'd be very surprising to see if any of those end up in a What's Sold recap at some point, but we're going to go through this anyway. First sale of the week over on eBay. This is Gardner, 50th anniversary, 1900 to 1950. This was a book published by the Gardner Board and Carton Company here in Ohio. Hardcover, covered the history of this company. Really unusual piece. Didn't really see anything like it out there. Had it listed, I think, for $27.99. Sent out an offer and sold it for $22.49 plus shipping. The buyer paid a total of $29.68. I paid $4.39 in fees, $2.08 for the promoted listings general fee. My cost of goods sold was 50 cents. This was part of a big bulk buy that I did recently. My total cost $14.16. My net profit $15.52. I tend to buy, when I can find these, like old corporate history books. There's generally not a lot of them out there. They can be a little difficult to price, and they're not necessarily fast movers, but I generally, just much like regular college and high school yearbooks, there's almost always eventually going to be a buyer for this type of item. So unless they're outrageously priced, I will usually grab these sort of things. Next up, over on Etsy, Drill Team USA from 1974, an illustrated hardcover in its dust jacket by Marilyn Rice, Dale Robbins, and Don Rice. This was from the 1970s again, covering a U.S. drill team. So like band type stuff. Really interesting old piece that I picked up as part of that big 15,000 book lot coming up on 3 years ago now. Listed and sold for $24.99 plus shipping. I paid $3.20 in fees. Shipping cost was $5.38, paid, of course, by the buyer. Cost of goods sold, 4 whole cents. Net profit on this thing, $21.75. Pretty cool sale. Another one on Etsy, Kettering Digest, 1982, Reflections Press from Dayton, Ohio. This was a reprint of a book that was originally published by National Cash Register, NCR, which was located and headquartered in Dayton. That book was originally published in 1956. This was a paperback reproduction from the 1980s, picked up again as part of a big lot for 50 cents. This sold for $24.99 plus shipping. I paid $3.21 in fees, no offsite ad fee. 50 cents again, cost of goods sold. This thing netted me $22.03. Back over to eBay. I talk about old textbooks all the time. Here are 2 that sold to one buyer. Metaphysics of Descartes, a study of the Meditations, and The Method of Descartes, a study of the Regulae. Both of these were written by L.J. Beck in the 1960s. Nice hardcovers in pretty good condition. The buyer paid a total of $26.38 for these 2. These were part of my current sale. They weren't in the 70% off thing, but I think they were like 25% off. So a little bit of a discount to move these older items. But again, cost of goods sold, 4 cents a piece. These were part of that big lot, so 8 cents total. I'll take that. The buyer paid a total of $34.12. I paid $4.77 in fees, $2.27 in promoted listings fees. Again, that 8 cents cost of goods sold. My net profit, $19.25 on these 2 old textbooks. Les Pavillons, French pavilions of the 18th century from 1963, a second printing, kind of a coffee table sized hardcover with its dust jacket. Dust jacket had a little bit of wear, but overall this was a pretty nice looking piece. Fairly unusual, a little difficult to find. I found this at a private pick that I've talked about a couple of times on this show. I think I may have actually another one coming up from that same pick at an estate seller's warehouse. Picked this up. I paid $1.53 as part of a bulk buy at that warehouse. This thing sold for $37.99 plus shipping. The buyer paid a total of $47.21. I paid $6.75 in fees, $3.30 for promoted listing fees. Again, cost of goods sold $1.53. My total cost $20.80, leading me to a net profit of $26.41. Mercari on the board with Picasso 46 Lithographian by R. Piper and Company. This is a German language illustrated, kind of a pocket-sized hardcover from 1956. This was, again, part of a big bulk buy of art books that I did recently. Into it for 50 cents. This sold on Mercari for $38 with free shipping. No fees. That will hold true for one more day. And then Mercari reinstitutes their seller fees at 10%, but this one went out with no seller fees. It did cost me $4.55 to ship by Ground Advantage. Again, my cost of goods sold was just 50 cents. Net profit on this little book, $32.95. Thank you, Mercari. Back over to eBay. History of the World, Volume 3 by John Clark Ridpath from 1885. This was a leather-bound illustrated hardcover in fairly nice condition for a book of that age. I had a couple of others that sold in a previous episode. This one was listed for $49.99, sold on an offer for $42 plus shipping. Big, heavy book. Cost media mail shipping rate was $9.13 on this thing, so the buyer's total $55.17. I paid $7.82 in fees, $3.86 for promoted listing fees. I sent this by Ground Advantage and saved a little bit on the shipping at $7.72. Cost of goods sold was $1 at an estate sale. My total cost $24.44, which led to a net profit of $30.73 on this book from the 1880s. A set of CDs, Jazz, the Smithsonian Anthology by obviously a mix of artists. This was a 6 CD set with a hardcover book in a plastic slipcase, published back in 2010, listed and sold on eBay for $49.99 plus shipping. The order total $60.31. I paid $8.51 in fees, $4.22 for promoted listing fees. Shipping cost was $6.13, paid of course by the buyer. My cost of goods sold, I picked this up at an estate sale for $3 back in the summer. Total cost to me $26.05. Net profit $34.26. I am not currently really buying many individual CDs, but I almost always will at least look up box sets because they're generally priced super cheap at sales. This one, again, $3 for this thing that I sold for $50. So even if you're not a media seller, if you see box sets of CDs, they're generally worth at least taking a minute to look them up to see if there's any value there. Back over to Etsy. This was an interesting one. I picked this up again at that private pick at the estate sale. This is Breeds of Cattle by Herman R. Purdy, which was completed by John R. Dawes in 1987. Again, kind of a coffee table, illustrated hardcover with its dust jacket. Big, heavy book that was literally just artist depictions of different breeds of cattle and then like a description of what they were. A really unusual piece. Found this at that private pick, looked it up, looked like it had good value, so I picked it up. $57.99 was the listed price. I got an offer for $52.19 on this thing, and that's what I went ahead and took. I don't know how they came up with $52.19, but we'll take it. The order total, $65.61. I paid $6.20 in fees. This was in the offsite ad fee program, so $9.20 for the offsite ad fee. Ouch. $9.13 to ship. Again, cost of goods sold $1.53. Total costs $30.35. I made $35.26 on this book from an initial investment of $1.53. That's a good deal. Back over to eBay. A History of the American People, From the Civil War to World Power by James Adams, published back in 1933. Cool old book in reasonably good condition, also part of the big 15,000 book lot, so cost of goods sold 4 cents. Listed and sold for $64.99 plus shipping. The buyer paid a total of $78.25. I paid $10.93 in fees, $5.48 in ad fees. I did save a little bit in shipping on this at $6.13. Came in just under the weight that I had put in. I always allow, if something weighs, let's say 15.5 ounces, I wrap everything in newsprint. So I always account for at least a half an ounce or an ounce for that wrap and the tape. In this case, it came in under what I had estimated, so I made I made 50 cents on the shipping. Yay me. Cost of goods sold again 4 cents. Total cost 28.96. Net profit 49.29. Mercari again. I don't get really many offers on Mercari at all, but I did have one buyer last week that reached out with a offer for a bundle of 6 different books ranging in cost from about $10 on up. The 6 books totaled $85. Mercari's really good at showing you when you get a bundled offer what those books would sell for if they sold individually. These books would have sold, I think, for a total of $100. So I thought an $85 offer was more than fair for these 6 books. So I went ahead and took that $85. Free shipping on these, no fees because it was sold before the cutoff. Shipping cost was $8.42. My total cost of goods sold for these 6 books was a whopping $4.62. So even after shipping, my net profit was $71.96 on 6 old books sold over on Mercari. Here's the one that should have been in last week's. This should have been the flip of the week last week, but for some reason I didn't have the graphic loaded. So you're going to get it this week. This is a really interesting group of things. American Indian Horizon, America's most important Indian monthly newsletter. I was at, again, the same warehouse where I did the private pick that I talked about with the 2 art books a little bit ago. This was at another event of theirs back in the summer, and they had just random like magazines and newsletters everywhere. And I found these American Indian Horizons, and I couldn't find anything really on them. So I wasn't quite sure what they should be priced at, but I thought they would probably have some value. I asked what they wanted for them. She said, how about 10 cents a piece? So I was like, yeah, okay. So I picked up all 13 of them. I had them listed individually for, I believe, $14.99. I had a potential buyer reach out and ask if I would take $12 a piece for all 13 of them. I was into them for 10 cents each. So I was like, yes, I will do that. Let me update this listing to reflect the fact that all 13 will be in your bundle, and we'll do this. So 13 issues of American Indian Horizon sold for $156 plus shipping. Order total was $183.06. I paid $21.04 to eBay and fees, $13 for the promoted listing fee. Made a little bit of money on the shipping at $9.55. Cost of goods sold, again, 13 issues at 10 cents a piece, $1.30. Total cost $58.35. This sale netted me $124.71. When I see like just random weird magazines, newsletters, something really highly unusual that I don't feel like I've ever seen before, I always try to look them up and just see. This was a case where there was nothing to go off of. There were no comps. I couldn't find anything on these. So I just took a stab at it. I went ahead because they were so cheap. I went ahead and picked them up. I figured if they never sold, I was only out $1.50 or whatever for them. And here we are. They were in my inventory for maybe 6 months, and I made a net profit of almost $125 on these. I will take that, and I will definitely take this next one, which is now our flip of the week. These I picked up as part of a big bulk buy. Again, I'm into these for 10 cents a piece. These were the Herald of Asia Library of Contemporary History. It is a series. I think there were 8 books in the series. In this box of random magazines I had 6 of the 8. Comps looked to be anywhere in the like $35 to $60 range. I listed mine at $49.99 a piece, listed them all individually, and I had a buyer on Etsy that bought 5 of the 6 at full price plus shipping. So 5 of these, the Manchurian Emergency, Further Military Operations, the Shanghai Affair, Outstanding Issues in Manchuria and Mongolia, and Anti-Foreign Education in China. Really cool old pieces. Small. I think the biggest one maybe had 60 pages in it. Most of these were like 30-page booklets written and published in Japan back in the 1930s, 1932 and 33. Again, part of a box of stuff that I bought for an average of 10 cents a piece. So my cost of goods sold on these, 50 cents. The buyer paid essentially $50 a piece. This was part of a sale over on Etsy, so it ended up being $224.95 plus shipping. Just amazing. The order total was $242.70. I paid $22.30 in fees, $663 to ship these. I did add insurance because of the value of this, so that's why the shipping was a little higher. Again, cost of goods sold 50 cents. My total cost $41.80. Net profit on these 5 little booklets, $200.90. That is a win. I will definitely take it. And that is going to put a wrap on this week's episode. As always, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time with me. If you'd like to spend a little more, I'll probably be live Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. here on YouTube. I also have 2 Whatnot shows coming up this week. We've got vintage art books on Wednesday at 7 o'clock Eastern, 7 p.m. Eastern, to be clear. And then Friday night show will again be science fiction and fantasy. That is also at 7 p.m. Eastern. Please let me know what you think of any of this. I appreciate you very much. If you got something out of this, please do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. If you are not subscribed, and many of you are not, please consider doing that. Again, as of the time of recording, I'm real close to 2,000. That's a number I'd really like to get to. So if you're not a subscriber and you got something out of this, and this is the kind of content that you like, or at least get something out of, please consider doing that. Until next time, my friends, it's time to sell. Thanks, everyone.
You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.